Hey guys, Jason Scudellari from CPP. I'm getting ready to do some installs on our 67 Nova. Right here I got 3 different kits. We got our narrow leaf spring, high clearance sway bar, and traction bar kit. Well, enough talking, let's get to work. Hey, I'm Jason Scudellari from CPP. Next to me is Danny Nix. And I brought Danny in because he knows a ton about everything I've installed over the last couple of days. Kind of want to start with the narrow leaf springs. Tell us why.
The main point was to get a bigger tire in the back of the car. Okay. So we narrowed up the leaf spring and then we offset the leaf spring off to one side so that you'll basically gain an extra ½ inch of room at the tire to leaf spring.
Awesome. Let's go with your guys' shackles and maybe get into the bushings a little bit and why they're good.
Okay, so this is our high performance shackle kit. We use a different bushing than about anyone else out there. We call it a D-spec bushing, so it doesn't squeak and it has very little flex, but when it does flex, it'll actually flex. It has some memory. The whole idea here was with a bushing machine like that, with the steel sleeves in there and the larger hardware, is that there's no side-to-side deflection.
Since we're in this area, let's talk about the traction bar setup. Very easy to install. Did some videos on that. I hope you go back and watch them if you ever do decide to buy this kit, which I recommend you do. Anyhow, back to the traction bars and why.
So our design's a bit different maybe than what most people have done. It's similar, but it's different. So where the traction bar mechanism is getting the pressure on the leaf spring, we put that on a large 1-inch wide plate, not on a round pin. So on the large flat plate, it takes the stress off the spring in a point and spreads it out over a larger area. So way more leaf spring friendly to begin with. It all bolts on pretty simple up in the front. If you had the factory axle still in the car, this is on our narrow spring obviously. It bolts in. We just changed the spacer down here so it'll accommodate the various sizes. There's also, so you got lowering blocks in there and you got it down low to the ground and you don't want this, there's a shorter version of that. The way the whole system works is when the axle tries to twist under horsepower, the leaf spring might start to get a little wrapped. It does wrap, it'll push this link forward. This link pushes onto the chassis at the spring mount forward on the car, and what stops it from pivoting is that 1-inch wide strap I was just talking about. So it's a real efficient way to push the car forward and take the twisting stress out of your leaf spring.
Very cool. And you know, it was a simple install. You're going to gain a bunch in the performance side, so definitely recommended. The third thing I want to talk about on the car that I just wrapped up is the sway bar, and we kind of went with the fancy high clearance sway bar with the billet clamps. Let's talk about that a bit. Sure.
So you mounted the bar in the billet clamp. It's a 3-inch piece of billet. It's made for a 3-inch axle tube, and then it mounts the bar on the billet lower piece with the bushing, so that it ends up with a real smooth rotation. Another feature, you probably didn't even see it in the bushing, is that those are full of grease channels. When you grease this, the sway bar is going to be riding essentially on a cushion of grease, but it's solid on the edges. It's not going to leak grease out and make a mess. The bar itself, it's 1.25 inches too. They're really rigid bars compared to what most people are thinking. They're thinking, oh, it's tubular, it's going to be flimsy or something, but the reality is it only works between the end to end where the legs go forward at. So shortening up how much is actually twisting means it twists a lot harder. Therefore, it's a more solid sway bar. Gotcha. The legs that run forward, these are all 3/8 laser cut steel. It's got a bunch of holes cut out of the side. It looks kind of trick when you look at it from the side. It looks really racy. Whole thing is lightweight. It's got a big clearance for the shock, big clearance for the differential. So it falls in line with the mentality of it's a high clearance rear sway bar. Plus, it's adjustable up on the front end. You've got 3 adjustments on each side, and you can adjust one side at a time, so you get plenty of range.
One thing I kind of want to get into a little bit, your ends are welded on.
There are some that make a 2-piece bar, 3-piece, and they bolt the ends on, but you end up with a lot of hardware out here. So we weld it on in the position it should be to begin with, and it's just way cleaner, way simpler.
All right, so going back to one more performance product on the car, subframe connectors.
Right, so it's got our subframe connectors. These are a bolt-in. We've tied in the leaf spring mount, so it goes from there all the way up to the front suspension area on the car where the chassis is reinforced and more rigid from the factory. And given that this is a unibody car, these are notorious that when you go on driveways and things, you'll hear them creak and move. A subframe connector is a great addition to add to the car. Really helps in strengthening up the actual chassis. It's almost like a doubling the size of the frame that was underneath the car to begin with.
All right, so all these parts that we've talked about thus far are all sourced here in the United States, correct?
Yes. Yeah, we make all of this actually right here in Southern California.
Well, there's one last thing I'd like to talk about all this performance that we put into this car, and that's the shocks. You know, we do offer a gas charge shock. In this case, we've used all the high-tech, pretty stuff, which isn't that much more. I totally recommend getting these parts for your car if you're gonna do it. Spend the extra couple bucks, you're gonna love it. But the dual adjustable shocks.
Billet aluminum shock bodies on here, they're dual adjustable. That means you can adjust the compression and the rebound independently, which is nice. So you can fine tune that to ride the way you want it to ride, whether you're on the track or you're just trying to cruise around. Adjusting compression and rebound separately really means that you can set it up to go autocross or road race or drag race and cruise, and they're really all different settings.
Like you said, it's best of both worlds. Fine tune it for the track, fine tune it for the comfortability of driving from work and home. All the best stuff here. So if you can, make sure you visit classicperform.com. Order your parts now. Thank you for your time, Danny. I'll see you next time.